Welcome back to A Fresh Story, the podcast where we have conversations about brave decisions to start over again. I'm Olivia.
And I'm Jenny, and we're so glad you're here today.
Hello, sister. How are you?
I am very good. How are you?
I'm okay. I did my hair today. I actually talked to you while I did my hair, which is lovely.
You did, yeah.
And I have my favorite black bodysuit from Amazon on, which I love sharing with people. It's my favorite thing I wear.
Yep.
My favorite. It's my uniform. Mm-hmm. And I'm taking the kids out this afternoon, going to try to disconnect a little bit. So, we're getting through the week. Yeah. What's going on with you?
Not too much. I'm going to make dinner soon. I'm going to make this chicken that we're obsessed with and this really delicious salad. And, I've been sort of reeling because I recorded this wonderful episode of a podcast with our guest today. And I'm looking forward to it coming out. We're talking about Matt Gilhooly. He's such a wonderful interviewer. And Olivia and I were just discussing this because Olivia has an episode coming out with him too. So you'll have to look for our episodes when this comes out.
We'll link them.
And the Life Shift podcast. But Matt is such an excellent interviewer. He gives so much space. He holds so much space for the guests to tell their story. And I've listened to his podcast, so I know that. But as a guest, I felt so held and so cared for. He is just such a caring, loving person. He is another one. I think, Olivia, you met him through Pod Lottery.
I did. And we met through Pod Lottery, which is so funny because Pod Lottery is like a podcast marketing thing. And I always joke, I'm like, we meet people in the most weird ways. And we connected there because, the Life Shift podcast is similar in vein to A Fresh Story. And we connected and we've now become text friends. Matt texts me every day. He's a really
good friend.
He's a really good friend.
He's very caring and very careful. I mean, there was a word that I wanted removed from the title of my podcast episode, and he was like so apologetic, and I was just so grateful. He doesn't need to be apologetic. He's just so careful with his people. And he had an enormous trauma in his life that he talks about on the episode, and we're really grateful for him sharing that with us. He's also a grandma's kid. He was like, we are grandma girls, and he's a grandma boy. And that was really special because when you meet somebody that you have shared that connection with their grandmother, it feels significant.
Yeah, he went through this huge thing as a child, and actually he was about the same age that my boys are, and so I definitely got very emotional talking to him, and he's come through so much, and he loves to support people and help people, and he's just a wonderful storyteller. So please enjoy this episode with Matt, and please check out the Life Shift podcast as well. Yep. We have many of our guests are on there as well. I know an episode with Danny Quinn is coming out, and Beth Booker, and we share a lot of the same guests. So go check that out too.
Matt Labrie.
Matt Labrie, exactly.
But also I listened to a great episode the other day about toxic masculinity with this guy. I think he was from Connecticut. I did look him up to see if we knew people in common because he did go to Choate. But, just great episodes with tons of great people across all different walks.
And he is just a fantastic podcaster. He just really is.
Yeah.
So please enjoy this episode with Matt, and please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to A Fresh Story so that we can keep telling fresh start stories. Matt Gilhooly is the creator, producer, editor, and host of the Life Shift podcast. Spurred by his own life-altering experiences, Matt helps others share their stories of pivotal moments in their lives that changed everything forever. He also enjoys designing content such as communication materials, coloring books, digital art, pitch decks, and other forms of media. Matt has self-published over 10 coloring books on Amazon and released a children's book that celebrates individuality and confidence, I Can Be Anyone, A Soul's Journey, in June 2021. Matt earned his master's in mass communications from the University of Florida in 2022 and an MBA from the University of Central Florida in 2004. He believes that we must take time to support the people around us to achieve success, which is what we're all about here at Fresh Starts. I'm so excited to chat with Matt. Matt and I became friends from Pod Lottery. And, we're all about like other podcasts that are similar, in vein to Fresh Starts and A Fresh Story. And we kind of like connected on Twitter, and Matt and I have become good friends. And so we're super excited to have him here tonight. So thanks for taking the time to chat in your fancy podcast and studio over there.
Thanks for having me. This is our first time meeting, actually.
I know. It's very exciting. I feel like I tell you everything
No,
and
it doesn't feel like it.
No.
It's so funny with people from like the internet. Also, like with my sister, like I know you through her, obviously, but like it's so funny. It's like she has this whole other world I don't know about that existed on Twitter, and I just recently have tapped into it, and it's like I feel like she finally invited me to hang out with her friends.
I know, it's like a trolls experience. It's like
cool kids table now.
Exactly.
100%. That's been my whole life. Is my sister bringing me to the cool kids table? How are you doing tonight, Matt?
I'm so good, except for the fact that I just did my taxes. There's that.
It's awful.
Always
it's
a bummer.
Good. Yeah.
But
I do mine, and then I like close my eyes and like hit like send, basically.
Well, I don't want to send it because I have to actually send the money too. So I'm going to delay that part just a little bit.
Yeah.
But I just finished listening to your episode where you guys were talking about high school. And so kind of in honor of that, I do have my middle school PE shirt on for you guys. So
yeah, and I did notice it's like ripping. I love how worn in it is.
I'm jealous. I mean, we're talking 1993 here, so this is quite an old shirt.
I'm impressed. I'm impressed with the quality of that shirt, truly.
It's seen a lot of my life
moments. Yeah.
I love it. I truly love it. We had PA shirts, and I think about them sometimes because they were so soft. I don't know what happened to ours. I wish I had them. Yeah.
The shorts, not so much. The shorts were not good.
No, it was bizarre, truly. Anyway, we could go on about PE clothes forever, but
that's actually my fresh start.
By the way, I'm sure some people have some fresh start in gym locker rooms. I had a gym locker buddy. We had to share lockers, and she kept locking herself in the locker. And I was like, what do you want me to do about this? Like, you're inside. Anyway, why don't you take us back to the beginning of your fresh start story?
So I was thinking about what I was going to talk about, and I think I wanted to talk about something that I really haven't talked about publicly before. And I want to say that the fresh start starts a little bit before that. And so in 2015, my grandmother was dying of lung cancer, and I had the pleasure of, I don't know if pleasure is the right word. I had the honor of sitting with her for her last 96 hours of her life. And it was a pleasure because it was really the most devastatingly beautiful thing I've ever seen to see someone take their last breath. But during that time period when she was dying, she said to us, because she was a worrier her entire life, and we inherited that. And she said, you know what, I wish I hadn't worried so much, because all that matters is love in the end. And so we're all sitting there and waiting, because I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but when someone has cancer and they're dying, you're just kind of like, when is this going to happen? And when it happened, I remember telling myself, I need to stop worrying. I need to start just doing the things that I want to do, and not the things that society told me that I should be doing. I talk about this a lot on my podcast about the checklist life. I felt like I was really living that. You graduate high school, you go to college, you graduate college, you get a good job, you get offered promotions. You're just kind of doing these things that, like, the next best thing that comes along, you have to take. And I wasn't really making any of those decisions for me. They were just kind of like what I thought the world was telling me that I needed to do. And so at that moment was kind of this fresh start approach to life, in which I was confident in making decisions and doing things that served me. Which brings me to, I had an opportunity to leave my job in Florida and move to the mountains of Colorado. And a family friend, I was going to work for her and kind of just take like a sabbatical, just get away. My grandmother had just died. I wanted to like just not do what I was doing every day, hating, my job on a regular basis. So I moved out there. I started exploring the mountains, doing like outdoor things, which wasn't really my thing. Got into a relationship, and then started losing myself, and like just bending over backwards to whatever, just because I started getting back into that, like, I have to be whatever someone else wants me to be, not what I want to be. And after a period of time, that relationship ended up with betrayal from the other side, and I lost it. Like I just went into a spiral that I had never experienced before. It was like a panic attack. I'd never had panic attacks before. I mean, I had experienced loss early in my life, never had a panic attack. But in this sense, I just like felt so lost and kind of in this spiral, and like immediately just made so many hasty decisions
Yeah.
that were a fresh start. Like I sold everything I owned. I decided immediately I was moving back to Florida. I quit that job out there. I found a job here in Florida. I moved here within like a couple weeks with all that just fit in my car, sold everything else, just like really went down to like nothing. And I thought I was like, yeah, I'm taking over, right? I'm like so independent. Little did I realize that I was just like so, so much in a spiral.
Yeah.
So much so that I started that new job and I was just so like pretending to be okay and depressed and anxious and all that other stuff underneath, all from that betrayal. Like, what did I do? How did I let this happen? Quit that job, then didn't have a job for 5 months. And so my point of this whole thing is that like that fresh start taught me so much about slowing down and listening to myself and being okay in the mess and thinking back, like, what if I had done that when the betrayal happened? Where would I be now? And so I don't regret it, but at the same time, we all think that we're smart enough to not do these things. And then that emotion of like betrayal and like, and then thinking, what did I do? How is it me? Created this fresh start journey for me. And so since then, I'm able to reflect on that and like really create the life that I want. But I think I had to go through it all, which is,
Yeah.
important. But really, that fresh start was like I kicked it off at high gear, did all these cool things, lost myself again. Then I thought I was starting a fresh start, like, but I did learn a lot from that experience. But selling everything, feeling really like, oh, like I was on top of the world in the moment felt very fresh start for me. But it really wasn't until I had processed all that.
I know what Olivia's going to ask. I think she's going to say, take us back to your relationship with your grandmother. And how
That's
that
exactly what
affected
I
you.
was going to say.
But I have a question too, and I don't want to forget. I think we should go back to your grandmother, but I'm curious what kicked you out of that spiral at some point too. So we can go back to your grandmother, but let's remember that other question of
You
like
can start with the spiral. You can start with the
because
spiral.
Matt, I had not when I left my ex, I felt that like I gotta go, like let's go, like I gotta get the place, and like I was like obsessive about finding a place and getting stuff, and I felt like I was sprinting, and I didn't know that felt like I was sprinting until I stopped feeling like I was sprinting. And I booked a ticket to go see Thomas, after 2 days of talking. And that was kind of the thing that kicked me out of it, which I was like, I booked it. And then I was like, oh my God, what did I just do? And I canceled it the same night. And it was a much shorter time period, I think, than it sounds like what you did. But it was the same thing where I was like, I woke up the next morning and I was like, oh my God, I can take a breath. Like, I feel like I've been sprinting for 2 weeks and I didn't even know that. And then I was able to sort of be like, okay, wait, what do I want? Do I like this guy? Why did I just book a ticket to go see him? What am I doing? Okay. Like, and I was able to move in a slower pace. So I'm curious what that thing was that kicked you out of it.
What's interesting, I think, with the betrayal portion of that and the way that relationship ended, I took on a lot of that responsibility that was not mine to take on. Mm-hmm. And I think that selling everything showed that I was good, right? Yeah. Making the decision to move showed that I was doing well.
Yeah.
Getting a new job right away showed success. Like, I'm going to show you after betraying me.
Right.
I'm okay. Look how amazing I am. Look at this life that I'm creating for myself now. I'm so independent, and I think it was, to your point, just very much of a sprint. Yeah. And what happened was, you know, like throughout my life, when I was younger, my mom died, and it took me over 2 decades to really grieve her. And so I understood how my emotions could wave. Like I understood what depression felt like. I understood what anxiety felt like. I didn't understand what that panic attack was. That was something new. But so I was working at this new job, higher level, felt like cool. Like I've never done this job and they want me and they're paying me. And it was like the most miserable experience. I just felt like I didn't belong. I didn't want to be there. I just wanted to go home and go to bed. And I knew something was happening inside, but I was trying to cover that up. And so hastily I quit. I was like, I can't do this. This is not good for my soul. When I think subconsciously, I knew I needed time to
Mhm.
just slow down.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a plan. I just quit. And part of it was like, okay, something's not right, Matt. You need to address this. And financially, you'll be okay for a little bit. And if you have to, you can go work at Target. You can go do whatever. You can find
Yeah.
a way to pay the bills.
Yeah.
But something needs to change. You're not winning. You're not
Mhm.
like you're not doing what you set out to do a couple years ago when your grandmother died. And so it was really like quitting everything and then just sitting and like, now what? I don't have a job to go to.
Yeah.
You can only go to the beach so many times. You can only go, you know, like there's only so many things
Mhm.
you can do that seem like you're having a good time until you
Yeah.
really have to sit,
Yeah.
process. What did you do? What should you have done in this situation? Did you contribute to this betrayal in this piece because you lost yourself for so long? What did you do? And so I don't know that there was a moment like you, like buying that ticket and sitting and thinking, oh
Yeah.
crap, what did I do? But for me, it felt very much like I just needed to stop and I needed to actually take the time and process and figure out what I needed and how I was going to do that. So,
You ran out of road is what really happened, right? I mean, you were sprinting and there was nowhere else to go. You were
yeah,
left with yourself.
I ran out of steam too. Just like I
Yeah.
just ran out of, there was nothing else I could brag about in a fake way that
Yeah.
anyone cared about. No one cared to begin with in that sense. Like, great, you got to, like, I thought I was really just winning, right? Like,
Yeah.
look at me, look at this new life that I'm creating. The other person
Yeah.
didn't care. They were the one, you know, that screwed things up to begin with. So they
Right.
didn't
Yeah.
care.
They didn't care from the start. Yeah. I think that too, I don't know if you're like me, but I'm such a people pleaser as a natural instinct. And I so want people to see me in a certain way, or so wanted people to see me in a certain way. And I think what ends up happening, what happened to me at least, was that I got to a point where I was like, I can't care what people think anymore. Right. And I think that's what you're saying about what your grandmother's experience and what she said to you was you can't care about that. And I was so like I like had this like perfectly imperfect thing with my fiance, my ex-fiance, and was like, like, oh, we're not perfect, but like we kind of are, that was like my thing. And like, no, we argue, but we're really good at it. And so then I realized like I was so concerned that people like thought that he loved me. And like that was why in a way I wanted to get married. I wanted him to propose so that people thought that he loved me because I didn't think that he loved me and he didn't love me. And that was the reality of it. And so then I got to this point where I was like, well, I don't care what people think anymore and I can't care. And that was a good place to get. The thing is, that creeps back up and you have to do that. You have to like exercise that muscle over and over again of being like, no, I don't care what people think. No, I don't care what people think. And I feel like it's people think that you get to this precipice and you're like, oh, I don't give a shit about the world anymore. And that's done. But it's a constant exercise.
It is. And you know what? I think what also triggered it is, my mom, when she died, it was sudden, it was not expected. And as an 8-year-old, it felt like abandonment.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yes.
so my entire life after that, I was doing the things that people would approve of because I didn't want more people to abandon me.
That makes a lot of sense.
Oh, and so when this, I'm 30 something in this situation and someone betrays me and abandons me,
Mhm.
it probably triggered
Yeah.
that 8-year-old reaction
Yeah.
I'll show you how great I can be. And so, yeah, but to your point, it's not, it's not a one and done.
No, it's
And
not.
if I lived my whole life that way, people pleasing, because I thought that that would keep people around
Yeah.
so that I wouldn't experience the trauma again. So, yeah, I agree. It's hard not to get into that space. It's hard. This world we live in is very performative.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just get wrapped up in it.
Mhm.
I mean, we probably understand as podcasters,
Mm-hmm.
we have to put this stuff out here. We have to brag about it a little bit, but we also have to realize that we're just a drop in the ocean.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. So when you were going through this kind of like time and the spiral, I haven't forgotten my grandmother question, but we're going to go back to that.
Talk about it all day.
When you're going through this, who was your support system? Who was your team that hyped you up during that time?
I think I have a core group of friends that were very much by my side. I don't know that I was as one-on-one open with them about the experience. I mean, you've seen a little bit of how I interact with the social media world now. That's very much my way of processing since sometime in my 30s, is being very public about what I'm going through, sharing the darkest.
Yeah, we don't know anything about that, Matt.
That's how I process,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
people will judge me for that, and that's
Yeah.
okay. They're not ready to see that.
Yeah.
That's not who I was hoping could relate to what I was going through. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not looking for any of these pieces. I need to process out loud. I have a core group of what I would say best friends that were always checking on me, making
Mm.
sure things were fine. Uh, I don't know that I don't have a big family, so I didn't really rely on them. The family concern was always like, how are you going to pay your bills? You just quit your job. What are you doing?
Right.
Oh, did you make the right decision? Should you have stayed in Colorado? Should you have done something else? Maybe, but it was done. So,
Yeah.
I have a core group of friends, but I think I could not rely on them. I could rely on them to get through it. I could not rely on them because I needed to do it. I needed to rely on myself
Mm-hmm.
to kind of process all that. Not to say that I was isolating myself, but I didn't want to put
You
it on anyone else.
you
It
needed
wasn't
to
their
do
job.
it was the inner work. I
Yeah.
mean, that like you were living out a trauma from your childhood. So there was nobody else that could do that except for you.
And honestly, I don't know that I made those connections until this conversation right now, that
Yeah.
Yeah.
why I did it. But I think that I wanted to share this story mostly because I'm not the only person that's gone through this. And
No.
but guys we don't talk about this. Like,
No.
I think it's important. We're just as human as anyone else.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
there are tough parts that come along with being a guy as well. And to be vocal about them, I think is important.
Yeah, and I think losing your mother at a young age. I mean, I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I can't imagine what the rest of their life would look like if I tragically, I mean, not this is not tooting my own horn, but like, if like if
I can't
if,
even hear it.
right, like if they're, if I wasn't there, I think that it would completely change the course of their lives, right? And I have a good friend, one of our experts, my coach, and she also lost her mother when she was about, I think, 9, 10 years old, a tragic car thing too. And so, she talks openly about it, but it took her years, right, to talk about the grief. And she went through, like you did, tons of spirals until she kind of like figured herself out. And now she loves to help people too, right? You kind of come out the other side and want to help people share their stories and heal. So I am not surprised, right, that you started having these panic attacks because the body remembers, right? And as much as the body, as we try to, especially when you're 8, right, your body doesn't even have the language to remember. But when your mother, right, you're kind of in from a primal way when she abandons you, quote unquote, and is taken away from you, it's not a shock that then years later, when that kind of plays out in another very close relationship, you were having panic attacks because your body was physically reminding you of the feelings that you had when you were 8 years old.
It was so fascinating. It was really like, because I really had by that point, I felt like I had processed everything. Like I had
Yeah.
done the work, and I felt very good. People get mad at me when I say close the door on grief of my mother, but I felt like I felt like I had really processed it because it had been so long. And uh, it was just so fascinating to experience a panic attack because I was like, what? Like it came out of nowhere, right? And you're
Mhm.
like, what just triggered this? I have no clue because I'm logically trying to think through,
Right.
why can't I breathe right now? Like, why is everything really heavy? I don't understand what's happening. So yeah, it was really fascinating. And it is true. I mean, a lot of people on my show will talk about that book, The Body Keeps the Score.
Yep.
And it's, the trauma and the trauma. So it could have been just
Have
something
you read it? Have you read The Body Keeps the
like
Score?
some of it.
Yeah, I read it too, and I had
I
open
might not be
hearts.
smart enough for it.
I don't know. No, it's a great book. It's very, very emotional. I mean, I remember I
Yeah.
went through it and I had surgery when I was a baby, and I still think that I have repercussions like emotionally from that. Right. And so,
Yeah.
like, um, take us back. Haha. I knew I was going to say this, but take us back. So, obviously, your grandmother played a big part in your
Yeah.
life. Right. So,
Yeah.
what was the relationship like? How did that your mother's mother?
So no, that was my mom. I mean, my dad's mother.
Okay.
So my mom didn't have a fantastic relationship with her family. Her family is very interesting. I don't have a relationship with that family. There's not much of them left anyway, but she was a twin. She had a twin brother, and the parents were very much under the rule of their parents, or
Mhm.
I think the
Yeah.
father's parents, and like to the point where they didn't have driver's licenses their entire
Wow.
life. And my mom and her twin brother were forced every single weekend until they were 18 to go stay at the grandparents' house. Like, no choice. So it was a very demanding household of some sort. And my dad came along and stole my mom from the family. And so everyone on that family hated my dad, including not really liking my mom because she left them. She abandoned them in a way to try to live a life. And so she found a really strong relationship with my dad's mom, and
Mm,
they became like best friends, and they just did everything together. And when my mom died, my grandmother felt like she lost a daughter, but then also felt the responsibility of taking care of me because at that point my parents were divorced. I lived in Massachusetts with my mom, and my dad lived in Georgia. So I was not really going to see my father
oh,
much more than I would see him in the summer, and I would see
Mhm.
him at holidays when either I was able to fly there or he was able to fly to me. And so the relationship with my father was fine, but it was just not, I wasn't there.
Close.
My mom was the primary caregiver.
mhm.
And so I immediately, like when my mom died, I had to move to Georgia. I had to start a brand new school. I had
Wow.
to live in a new place. I had to get all new stuff, like everything was different. And so I think my grandmother saw that my dad was struggling because he wasn't. I mean, it's a big change for him as well, right?
Yeah.
He's mid 30s now, has to be a full-time parent, which that wasn't the expectation. I don't think he didn't want to, but it's just how it was. And so I think my grandmother kind of saw like, oh, he might need some help. So eventually when we moved to Florida, she followed us, and she was like, oh, I just want to be warm.
Mhm.
But it was really to be like a mile away from us. And she became just the person I would call every day after school. We became best
Mhm.
friends to the point that like my dad would be like, you really shouldn't be talking about that kind of stuff with your grandmother. And I was like, she brought it up, like she was the instigator. She was a really great person. And we just had the most fun together and created a relationship that I don't think would have happened if my
Right.
mom was still around. And I'm so thankful. And, when she got sick, I did everything I could to
Yeah.
make sure the rest of her life was the joy that she had given me. Because I think at that point I had finished processing my mom, losing my mom, and I like knew, okay, this is like gonna
Mm.
happen.
Yeah.
And the first time I didn't get to say goodbye. So I need to make sure that, I took her to front row to Josh Groban, who was her boyfriend. If she had posters of him in her bathroom and pictures of me in the house, just Josh Groban, but I'm not bitter about that. But I did these things for her, and those last when she was taken to hospice, well, actually before that, like her last birthday, we kind of knew it was her last birthday, and we knew we need to get everyone together. We need to get the whole family together, estranged family members together. We needed to just do it up because we kind of felt that this was the last one. And sometime during that trip when I was visiting, I was like, okay, here goes the guts. And I sat down, I said, we need to have it. We need to have this final conversation because I don't want to leave anything left unsaid because when my mom died, I didn't get to say anything. Right. And so there was no closure. And we sat there and we talked about like everything, like stuff you don't, that's like weird to say out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Like, thank you for just being a great human being and for loving me and doing all these things for me. And like who has these conversations? But it was literally the most, the best conversation I've ever had
Yeah.
in my entire life. And when I left that day, I was like, she could die tonight. Not that I
Yeah.
want her to, but she could die
Right.
tonight. And there is zero things left unsaid.
Yeah.
And it was like, I wish that for everyone, like to be
Yeah.
brave enough, not to toot my own horn in that I'm brave, but I think it's really hard to do. I don't think we're trained to have these conversations. And so, I just knew. And a couple months later, I had the opportunity to spend her last bit. I didn't know how long it was going to be. And I stayed in the hospice house, like on the couch. And my dad was like, you need to get out of here. And I'm like, why? I
Right.
I need to sit here. I need to be here
Right.
for the last parts. She was there for my first parts, like she was
Mm-hmm.
there when I took my first breath. I need to be there. And so the last part of the story is I was so tired because like when you're sitting there waiting for someone to die, it's just like exhausting, right? Because
Yeah.
when is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? So the last day I took a nap and I like think I slept like it was a coma, like it was like a 3-hour coma. And my dad and his wife woke me up and they're like, it's time. I got up, sat next to her bed, rubbed her head, was like, I'm here. You can go. She was gone within like 5 minutes. And she waited. She waited for me to wake up from my nap so that I could be ready to, to do that. And that relationship, I don't think I'll ever have with anyone ever. And that's okay. Like that
Yeah.
was like, you know, that's a blessing. Despite all the trauma that I had as a kid, it allowed me to have this beautiful relationship with my grandmother. And so when she said those words at the end, it was just like, well, we should probably listen.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
she did a lot for us. We should probably listen.
Yeah.
There I go. I listened and then I screwed it up, but now I'm listening again. So
Sometimes it takes a little while to process. You listened, but it took a little while to process.
for listeners, Jenny and I are both like almost sobbing. And
Really trying.
normally I would say that that's kind of embarrassing, but literally Matt does this on his podcast with guests all the time, so he understands. So many things. First of all, we very much understand because we had that kind of relationship with our grandmother, and she was like our third musketeer.
mm,
And I was with her right before she passed. I went to hospice and sat with her, and um it was the same feeling exactly. I had zero regrets about our relationship. I knew that I could let her go and it was peaceful and that we had this beautiful time together and it was zero regrets, right? And we talk all the time about how when you are so close to somebody in the living world, you know what they would say, right? So it's like you can let them go in a way because they're always with you.
Constant
Right?
conversation with her, like in our heads. I'm never like,
Do you
what would she
feel
think
that
about
like with
this?
your do you have that with your grandmother? Like she's with you a lot?
I want to say yes, but I think the logical part of me plays a big role here because of the journey that I had trying to grieve my mom
Yeah.
and compartmentalizing that in a way that like I don't miss my mom because I don't know my mom.
Yeah.
I
Right.
don't know her. With my grandmother, I was like I felt like a pro at grief. When she died, I felt like I knew what to do so that I would no longer be sad.
Yeah.
And I don't have many sad moments anymore, which
Yeah.
I'm really grateful for, but I have only the good memories,
Yeah.
only the super rude things that she would say to me on the phone. I could say this now. She would kill me if I said this out loud on a podcast, so I'm going to do it. But once we had really terrible humor with each other. This might not be appropriate,
It's
but
okay. We're
we
here
would
for it.
talk on the phone, and she would joke around all the time, and she'd be like, "Oh, you want to hear something?" Like, and I thought, oh, she's going to tell me a story. This is going to be great. She farted into the phone, and I died. I basically died, and that was our relationship in a nutshell. And I would tell everyone about this, and those are the things that I remember. Sometimes I like, oh, I wish I could call her right now because it was always my thing.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily hear her voice in my head anymore.
Yeah.
On my podcast, I actually found like a clip of a phone call that I recorded of her, and I had forgot I had it, and then I found it because our relationship. I sent her a picture of me and Josh Groban, her boyfriend, and I was like, "Open your email," and I recorded her reaction to that. So I have that, but yeah, I don't know that I don't have I don't have an internal conversation with her. I don't know if that makes me a bad person, but I feel like I
No.
really I closed it and I acknowledge how great that relationship was, and I cherish all those moments, but I don't really get sad anymore about it, which is great. I can see other people in my family haven't grieved yet,
Right.
and so they have a lot of those sadder moments. So I'm not sure.
There's no book to grief, right? There's no like checklist, as you say, right? To grief. Like everybody can grieve in the way that they want. And the problem lies in the fact that people judge the way that other people grieve, right? So it's beautiful. I mean, I just also want to acknowledge something because you said I don't know if I'm brave. You are probably the bravest person that I've encountered because to lose your mother at 8 and then move to a new place with really a parent that you didn't know in that same way. That's like the stuff you hear about in movies, right? You were like a movie kid, like, oh, mom died. Now I got to move to Georgia with the father I don't really know a ton, right? To live through that and then you could have taken and I know that there was some other stuff in your childhood you've talked about publicly, bullying and issues and things. You could have taken another route, right? You could have said, "Well, I'm gonna be an asshole and I'm gonna go ruin other people's lives and, I'm gonna not have this relationship with my grandmother because 'cause I'm a tough guy," or whatever. But you didn't. You chose to pursue the arts and
You
to
stayed
have
soft in a world
yeah,
that wanted
like
you to be hard.
and so that's brave. Like, that's really brave, and, like, I hope that you do give yourself credit for what you've been through because it's a lot, and, like, sometimes we say, like, a lot, like, we don't realize how much we've been through until we tell it to other people, and they look at you and they're like, you went through a lot in your life," and you're like, "I did?" So that's super brave, and I just wanna validate that for you, like, you have been through a lot and you're very brave and now you get to help other people and I know how passionate you are about that. So tell us a little bit about where the podcast came from, and you are like the most dedicated podcaster that I've ever encountered, and have such a beautiful podcast and like really get into it with people about their trauma. We're both going to be on the podcast coming up, which we're very excited about. So where did the podcast come from? Where did that idea come from?
Well, truthfully, it was an assignment to begin with. So during the pandemic, I was bored. And so, in true bored Matt fashion, I decided to get a second graduate degree because, like, what else would you do if you're bored while publishing coloring books and making kids' books and trying to just fill my time being locked in the house? And so, every term, I think this is part of like my do what you want kind of thing and challenge yourself. Every term we would have like a core class and then we'd have to take an elective. And so every time my elective would be something that scared me.
Mm.
So I would choose a class that my first experience, my undergrad and my MBA, those were all like easy for me. They were just like, I picked the easiest route because the easiest route back then was going to lead to people being impressed and me, meeting the criteria that I thought other people had of me so they wouldn't abandon me. So now it was like, this is my turn. So I took art of podcasting. And so we had to do an assignment. We had to do 2 episodes, interview style. And I kind of wanted to just have like a grief podcast. And then I thought, wow, that would be really depressing to just like so who died? Like that seems
I still
really
think you should do that, by the way.
That's
Next
Olivia.
way.
So who died? Yes, I 100% would love that podcast. Olivia and I wanted to do a podcast called What's Your Trauma, where we just like bring people out and we're like, so what's your trauma?
Yeah.
Same idea.
Yeah. I don't know. I was just very drawn to, I thought back to my childhood. And so, when I was 8, I knew logically that I wasn't the only kid who had ever lost a parent. I probably met others, but in that journey, I did feel very alone.
Yeah.
I felt like I was the only one. I
Yeah.
felt that way. And I also was curious if other people had specific moments in their lives that changed everything. Like my mom dying to me, like you pointed out, like
Yeah.
my life was never going to be the way it was going to be had she not died. And so it kind of brought me to this life shift. There were a couple, I think I came up with like 32 names or something as part of one of the assignments, and ended up with the life shift so that I could talk to people about these pivotal moments that changed things. And funny enough, throughout my conversations with people, I've been able to narrow down my moment to even more specific. It's not necessarily the moment that my mom died that changed my life, but rather the moment that I walked into my dad's office at his company and he sat down and he said the words, whatever, I don't know what he said, but he said something to the effect of like, your mother has died in an accident. At that moment, those precise moment was when my life changed.
Yes.
And so that's what I do on the podcast is I try to talk to people about, try to get as specific as possible. Was it a piece of mail? Was it an email? Was it something somebody said? Did you fall on your head? And, what was it that was specific? And to avoid the 100% grief talk, I also talk to people about internal shifts as well. Like I just bubbling up kind of moments in which one day I walked out of my house, went to work, quit my job and did X, Y, and Z and became a zoologist, or whatever they're called, something like that. So I do have 2 tracks, the podcast, external kind of moments and internal moments. I naturally gravitate towards the external ones because that's what I can relate to and the trauma. But some of them have been really interesting. It's been super fulfilling. I'm over a year now. And, you say I'm like the most dedicated. I think if my why wasn't so strong, like you guys have this really strong why because of what you're doing with A Fresh Start. And, I think if I didn't want other people to feel less alone in their experiences, I wouldn't be so far ahead. I think I'm like 12 weeks ahead with recording now, it's nuts. It's crazy, but it's the most fulfilling thing I've ever done. And it took me a while. Like you read this bio of me being a creator and creating things. I think those were all testing spots of how I could process what I needed to process. And then this medium was the one that fit. It was the puzzle piece that was always missing.
I love that. So what, if you want to share, because I'd love to know,
Yeah.
I've listened to obviously a bunch of your episodes, but were there any specific episodes that really knocked you on like, you were like, woof, that was like an emotional experience?
Yes. That's the hard part. I think that I have empath tendencies. I think that I have empathy for a lot of people, and it's hard for me to not absorb a lot of the conversation, to the point that I've now created boundaries for myself in which I will only record up to 2 episodes a week, up to only 1 a day. Like I have to protect myself. So usually it's ones that relate to a similar path. Your friend and now my friend Beth, she has an episode coming soon on my show. And I told her that talking to her about her experience and the life shifts that she has multiple, but that have kind of sprinkled throughout her life and kind of created who she is. Talking to her was the first time where I felt that the goal of my show was met with me as a participant. And so my goal is always that like one person hears the episode and feels less alone. In that conversation with Beth, I was that person. I felt validated in my experiences, how I felt as a 16-year-old having lost my mom earlier. And like a lot of the things that Beth said, I was like, me too. Like,
Yeah.
so that was a nice experience. That was not something that knocked me on my butt, but it was
Right.
something where it created a validation that I didn't know that I needed,
Yeah.
but also
Yeah.
showed me like, oh, maybe the show does work.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point
Because
of
it's
the whole.
working on you. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
I know.
amazing.
And you talked to our friend Daniel about losing his brother, and I know that episode was um very emotional, and you definitely got into it with him about that in a
You know,
beautiful
it's
way.
what's funny too is and you guys might feel this too when you go to record an episode with someone and you kind of have a baseline of their story, you kind of know a little bit, and you're like, I totally get it. This one totally relate to it, and then you have the conversation and you're like, wait, that's not what I expected. It's not what
Yeah.
I experienced. What?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was kind of like how like my conversation with Daniel was, is that like I totally went into it thinking, oh, I know exactly how he felt losing a brother.
Yeah.
Mm-mm, I didn't,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so that's what's so fascinating about this project. What you guys do is that like these stories need to be shared.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
You never
Absolutely.
know who's listening and who
Um,
needed to hear it at that moment in time.
No, I'm literally, as we're recording this, I'm thinking that are specific people I'm going to send this episode to because, like, they lost their parents young. And I think, you know, our generation was told to hold so much in, right?
Yeah.
Suck it up and don't go, we didn't go to therapy as kids.
well,
And,
there was
like,
an idea that kids were resilient. So they would just like their
Oh, it'll
lives
be
would change.
fine.
Yeah, they'll just bounce back and it's like, no, they're humans.
Well, I remember, to that point, it was 1989 when my mom died. And so to your point, no one was talking. Like maybe you go to the counselor 3 times at school because
Right.
that's the check mark you have to do. But I just remember it was like, oh, we're going to go to Disney in a couple weeks. We're going to,
Yeah.
like, do you want new clothes? You want a Game
Yeah.
Boy?
Yeah.
It was all very much a materialistic, like,
yeah.
as long as he's happy. And I think you absorbed that as a kid. I absorbed, oh, they want to see that I'm okay.
Yeah.
Want to see that I'm happy. So now I need to perform, which
Yeah.
all it does is prolong it. But at the same time, like when my dad, I did an episode, I flipped the script on my show and I told my story with my episode 1 guest interviewed me. And when I told it, I sent it to my dad after. And it was lovely because it was the first time that he had heard the story from beginning to end and all the things that he experienced, but from my perspective.
Mm,
Because normally you have a conversation with someone that you know, and it's just little pieces. It's just
Yeah.
little moments.
Yeah.
You're not telling them like beginning
yeah.
to end kind of story. And it allowed such a wonderful conversation afterwards, like full of, and where I'm going with this is like full of apologies. And I was like, you did the best you knew how to do with the
Yeah.
tools that you had.
Yeah.
Your parents didn't have the tools. Like even my most wonderful grandmother, like the best human I
Mm-hmm.
ever knew, she never processed the loss of my mom. She didn't have the tools, to the point where I would be like, tell me a story. And she's like, I can't, it's too hard. So, like we just do the best we can with what we know how to do. And he was just so apologetic. Like, I'm sorry I didn't do that. I'm like, I didn't know, you didn't know, nobody knew. We didn't know
Right.
what to do. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
were never given those tools. Hopefully now, 2023, that we feel like maybe we're starting to do this. Maybe you're doing that with your kids. Maybe,
I'm definitely trying, and I think like our having podcasts like this, right, and talking about
Yeah.
all these things is changing it, right? We're giving people
yeah.
permission, right, to talk about them and to talk about people we miss and we love, or how
Yeah.
we felt about things, and it's really important. So I'm just really excited that more people are going to find out about your podcast and hear all these stories. And what I love, and something we really talk about a lot with a fresh story, is that we like to have real people on to tell their real stories, right? Where
Yeah.
this is not like I mean, like, everybody has a story. And, you know, I love that you just are you have these authentic people who come on who just share their vulnerability and these things they've been through. And, it just gives it, like you said, it makes people feel less alone. So I just love that. And, you know,
Well, think of the value too for the person telling their story, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned it earlier. You never really tell that whole story, but when you do, there's value in that. I've had people like come on, share something that they've never shared before, and then like it instills confidence in them that they didn't know they needed,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
create change for other people. So there's value beyond just a listener. I told someone the other day that like my show is, I said 15% selfish. It might be more,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
this is serving that 8-year-old version of me that needed
Yeah.
to not feel the way he was feeling. And so, there is true value in the story, but you have to be ready to tell it. I
Yeah.
don't know
Yeah.
if you've seen that, but
Oh yeah, yeah, we've definitely seen that
Yeah.
with lots of guests. They come on
Yeah.
and it's tricky. We have guests like you and like many of our guests who we love and they come on and they are so open and honest and authentic and we have an amazing conversation and we've definitely had guests that are not ready to share their story
Yeah.
and you can tell the difference for sure.
yeah, and that's hard for me. I don't know how it feels for you, but with the life shift, I'm asking people, like, what is the moment in your life that changed
Yeah.
everything? And sometimes we think we're ready. And then, but to your point, like sometimes people come in with these scripted,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because it's this performative society that we're in. And we
Yeah.
feel, to Jenny's point, like we feel that people care, like they care how
Yeah.
someone else
Mhm.
is watching. They might think that X, Y, and Z about me. And so they come in scripted. So I do my best now to try to just create like what you guys do, this safe enough space that we're just humans having a conversation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And to me,
Mhm.
these are the conversations that everyone should be having in
Yeah.
public.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
like superficial, like we can talk about the Real Housewives, but like also let's talk about this stuff too.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Because
that's
100%.
100%. And that's what binds us, right? That's what changes our, connections to each other. And that's what's going to help change the future and, like, everything. So, Matt, if somebody is going through a life change or a life shift or a fresh start, what would be some wise words that you could impart to them?
well, if we go to my betrayal story, I would say sit in it and process it. Try not to make hasty decisions that, eventually could impact you. And maybe they're not bad, but take the time to process in the way that you need to, and try not to Jenny's point, try not to sprint, and try to not cover up whatever's happening. If it's coming from a trauma place. I always tell people, as it relates to a life shift moment, is if I had to give advice, which nobody really wants my advice, or nobody really wants advice just in general in these moments, but I tell people that it's okay to feel however you're feeling at any point in time, you know, especially after like a trauma. There are going to be days where you have a good day. You shouldn't feel bad for having a good day, right? Or there's going to be days where you're just sad on end and you can't get out of it. Honor it. You're a human being. You're going to go through all the emotions. And so that's kind of my advice now when someone is hitting some kind of like grief moment. I can't tell you how to do it, but I can tell you that you should be fine with however you're feeling at any point in time, because you're just being a human.
I love that. That's so true. I love that.
Yeah.
And,
Perfect.
again, you're allowed to feel two things at once, right? You can feel grief and sadness and also have a good day and have joy in your day too. And
Yeah.
that's something new for a lot of us to
Giving
figure out.
yourself grace is a lot of grace.
A lot of grace, yeah.
Yeah.
So the most important question we ask our guests, what was the last thing that you ate and truly loved?
Well, I want to get a sponsorship out of this. No,
Okay.
there's a chain restaurant, which is really weird to say that I like a chain restaurant, but there's a restaurant called Kava. I don't know if you guys have
I
them up
love
there.
kava.
So my new
Love
thing
kava.
is to just go and it's like half super greens, half brown rice, and then I put some chicken on it. Then you get 3 choices of hummus on top of it.
Mm.
And then I get like every single vegetable on top of it, right? And so it's like overflowing. Definitely get it in a to-go container, because
Yeah.
it comes 3 meals for like $10. So that's like my go-to now. You just put like all the delicious, colorful, like Giada from Food Network would be so happy because it has like every color on it. She would just be so proud of me. But yeah, I would love for them to just send me free food for the Life Shift.
Kava needs to sponsor Life Shift. Yeah.
I love Kava. I have to take Olivia to Kava. I don't think she's ever been.
No,
there's
I've
one
never
by the
been there.
mall.
If you go into the city, I know you guys aren't like near the city, but if you go into the city, there's a place called Dig. That place is pretty phenomenal as well. It's like Midtown or so.
You're a big, before we let you go, you're a big Broadway person.
I was listening to a Broadway song before I got on here to like hype me up, and had all sorts of curse words in it and everything, from a new show called Kimberly Akimbo.
I've heard of it.
Like, yeah, it's really good and sad and great. But there's a really terrible character in there who sings a song about making your shitty life better, doing everything against what humanity says you should do. Like, just terrible, but it's a great song.
What's your favorite Broadway show, like, ever? Sorry, I have to ask.
That's like Sophie's Choice, I think. That's like when someone says, like, what's your favorite?
Okay, so what's the most
podcast?
recently, what's the soundtrack you've been listening to recently?
Okay, so I'm gonna pick the show that I loved the most when I went on my last birthday trip, and that's gonna be & Juliet, which is kind of the bigger hit right now. It's Romeo and Juliet, but if Juliet didn't go through with the pact. So she didn't kill herself. She's going to go off and live her most independent life. But the story is told through Max Martin songs. So Britney Spears, Katy Perry, Backstreet Boys, Pink, Kelly Clarkson songs.
Sounds amazing.
And then,
check it out.
So here's the thing. You listen and you're like, wow, that song's really deep. Like, I didn't realize that those lyrics were so deep in this, in the way that they're singing this right now. So it was really great. Fantastic show. Super fun, high energy. The year before was 6. So that's another.
Wait, yeah, before, tell us, just because you had this like big birthday weekend, can you just name all the shows that you saw? Because you saw like a million shows in one weekend.
What did I see? Usually we try to see like 4 or 5 shows in like 4 or 5 days, 4 days. We try to see like 2 a day. We saw Kimberly Akimbo. We saw Hadestown. We saw & Juliet. We saw Bad Cinderella, which I won't say anything more about that. Did we see
you were just up here for your birthday.
Yeah, I was just there in February, and I think we saw one more. I can't see my playbills from here, but yeah, I just try to see them all, and usually most of them are good. The one this year that needs a little work is Bad Cinderella.
Where did that come from, that love of Broadway?
Are you familiar with Randy Rainbow? Do you know who he is?
No.
Okay. Well, in high school, I went to school with a friend, Randy Rainbow, who's now like big on YouTube. He does Broadway musical parodies, mostly about a particular president that a lot of people don't like. And so he's really the one that introduced theater to me. Like growing up, I did a lot of like little school plays and stuff like that, but we became really good friends. And so he introduced a lot of the shows. Like the first show I saw was Rent. And from there, it just kind of grew. But I like going to the city, and I like just, seeing the shows that it's not the same when you see them on tour. I mean, it's cool, but there's something about being in the city and walking to the theater.
You say the city because that makes you like a real New Yorker. Because
well, that's the city. Like you're
city.
Not saying New York City. You're
right.
Not
so like when you're from Long Island, like we are everything. There's only one city. It's the city, right? And so you said the city, but everybody outside of New York typically says New York City, and then you know that they're not really from New York. But you could pass as a New Yorker because you said the city.
Don't look at my phone. I know how to get everywhere. It's pretty simple. Nothing like a grid system, so. I don't know. I think people that have experienced trauma like theater as well. I think there's something about escaping in a story and kind of putting yourself, or even in the sense of like, this show made me feel a certain way. And I feel less, kind of like what we do on our podcast. I think there's something.
Maybe we need like a side podcast project that's like Broadway trauma things. Like,
tell me your trauma and tell me what Broadway show it's to.
Right. Like I'm like a Les Mis person, like through and through since I was like 10 years old. Like
No.
You know what? I'm gonna be honest. I like the movie, but like I had the
Here-
cassette tape of Les
we had
Mis.
we had the cassette
400
tape.
cassette tapes, you mean?
She
Yes,
had we
the
had
double.
the
It was two.
CD. I think
No,
had,
I had the double cassette.
And we had we were young. We were like 9 and 7. We had no idea what the story was, and we were trying so hard to piece together the story. And then that was our first Broadway show. Our grandfather took us to go see it.
Melting on my own. I have a cameo from Samantha Barks, who was in the movie from during the pandemic. Because when I went to see Pretty Woman, like right before the pandemic, she was out sick that week or something. So my friends bought me a cameo from her. I'm like,
I love her. Yeah.
Frozen now in the West End.
Oh, I didn't know that. Well, we're so excited that you were here and chatting with us, and just that you're a friend of the pod and a friend of ours. And again, you are so brave and so wonderful and have been through so much and just took that and are helping people and sharing their stories and sharing your story and providing a safe place so people don't feel alone. And that's really the most beautiful thing in the world. So thank you for everything you're doing. And tell us how people can listen to the Life Shift podcast.
Well, they can listen to it pretty much anywhere that you can get podcasts. This is my gripe with the podcast industry because it's like, where do you listen? Okay, let me get you that link. So the best place is probably just go to www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com. And then there are links to pretty much anywhere you want to listen. They're also on YouTube, so you can watch our conversations, which I don't know why you might want to watch an hour-long conversation, but some people are really into that. And so that's probably the best resource to go there, but it's on Apple, Spotify, Google, Good Pods.
Yeah. I know you're number 5 on Good Pods today, right?
4.
4. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah. God. And you have a lot of this. We share a lot of guests. So if you want to dig deeper into guests, you can head over to Life Shift.
I'm so excited to listen to Beth. It's so funny. These people that come into your life and like, we talk to Beth literally all day from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, but I didn't know her for the first 32 years of her life, so I have a lot to catch up on. So it's great to have these podcasts so she doesn't have to keep repeating her story over and over again.
I know, just have to keep giving our podcast episodes to therapists. Well, Matt, thank you for everything, and we're just so excited to have you in our orbit. And we can't wait to chat with you again soon.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to today's story. We're always here and we're proud of you.
A Fresh Story is produced by Fresh Starts Registry, the first and only platform for everything you need to begin again. You can read the show notes and learn more about today's episode at afreshstory.com.
As always, we want to remind our listeners that while we strive to provide accurate and helpful information, we are not medical doctors or mental health professionals. We want to remind you all that the information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice. We highly recommend consulting a qualified healthcare or mental health professional for any concerns or questions you may have. Remember, we are a podcast, but we are not licensed medical professionals. Always consult with your healthcare provider for any medical decisions. And as a gentle reminder, all opinions are our guests and do not necessarily reflect our own.